Welcome to episode 194 of the Grip Strip Podcast, the Blue Ovals in the Desert edition of the Grip Strip Podcast. My name is Philip Matthew. I'm your host, and I'm with my co-host, the iRacing Indy 500 champion, computer genius, a gentleman and a scholar, and recently coming off of his birthday weekend, so belated happy birthday to my boy, Josh Fine. What's going on, brother?
Hey, I'm doing great, Phil, and thank you for the birthday wishes and everything. And what a weekend of racing, of course, and seeing the Cup Series championship finales across all three series, and we'll get into it and everything. But yeah, the end of the year is finally here in racing, and yeah, now it's over, and it's like we just went through this whole year of racing, and now it's over. So I guess we got to talk about how it all ended, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to get into all three major NASCAR series, how the season finales went for all of them. From, I guess we can say, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we had other racing during the weekend, of course, the Brazilian Grand Prix, which, that looks like a pick. Oh, yeah, but that was just a bad throw by Zach Wilson. Fish Lips continues to win every single race, which and then the people that are complaining about how all the same assholes that had issues that when Lewis Hamilton dominated, he never won 17 races in a season and basically had nobody around him. So that seems convenient on top of all the other bullshit that they do. We'll talk about NFL week 9 and Jacksonville and the 49ers are both on bye, so and they're going to be playing each other this week, so we'll preview that game, and we'll talk about all things happening in the world, in the NFL world and in fantasy. CJ Stroud, I think, has locked up the NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year. If we were worried about him getting it, or if anyone was thinking anybody else would, I don't think that's going to be the case anymore. And more. We'll do the roundup, talking about the World Endurance Championship season finale at Bahrain and the postseason test. We will preview the MotoGP and Moto2 at Malaysia. They'll have a few more races left in their season. And the NHRA season finale, the In-N-Out Burgers NHRA finals at Pomona to end their 2023 season. Josh will talk about all things iRacing and gaming in a sim segment, and we will close the deal. So yeah, we'll start with the Cup Series at Phoenix International Raceway. It'll always be Phoenix International Raceway for me. I don't care what they call it. And it was the Cup Series championship race at Phoenix. And there were 4 drivers that walked into Phoenix with a chance to win the title. And they were William Byron, Kyle Larson, Christopher Bell, and Ryan Blaney. And in the end, the actual most popular driver in NASCAR, YRB, ends up the champion. All 3 drivers by the end of the race ended up in the top 5, but 3 of the 4 drivers ended up in the top 5, but it really wasn't as clear after the second stage. Right, and of course Rick Allen had a stroke or something making that call because he completely forgot that Ross Chastain won the race. Ross Chastain dominated after the first stage, or first 92 laps of the race, which William Byron led, and then he led 2 more laps after, or first 90 laps. It says 91 laps, and then it says 2 more laps he led, but it says he has, yeah. So he led 95 laps in total. He had led the first 92 laps consecutively in the race, and after that he kind of disappeared. And from then on, it basically became Kevin Harvick, Ross Chastain, and Chris Buescher. You had some of the other guys sprinkled in, Denny Hamlin in there. Hell, even Chase Briscoe led a couple of laps. That's something. But in the end, it was Ross Chastain, the victor a year ago. He finished second in the championship to Joey Logano after the Hail Melon. And he going and making it in with that last second attempt there, and then finishing second. This year he wins the race to end the season on a high note. Was sitting there with Busch beer in his hand, since he's going to be the driver of the Busch car next year, taking over for one Kevin Harvick, who has been the Anheuser-Busch driver for 12 years now. I think 12 years. 12. It's been 12 years. He's been the driver for Anheuser-Busch. So long partnership, one of the longest partnerships in recent memory in NASCAR, ended yesterday, and Kevin Harvick ends his career in the Cup Series with a 7th place finish, led 23 laps, was in the top 5 for a good part of the day, but his car fell off there late in the race. We'll get into the top 10 finishers and the other drivers who scored stage points. Ross Chastain, the winner, I mentioned, led the most laps. Ryan Blaney, second, and your 2023 NASCAR Cup Series champion. Kyle Larson, third, and after starting fourth, did not lead a lap. William Byron finished fourth, won stage 1, led 95 laps. Christopher Buescher finished fifth, won stage 2. Rounding out the top 5, Martin Truex Jr. 6th, Kevin Harvick 7th, Denny Hamlin 8th, Michael McDowell, the Arizona native, 9th, and Darrell Wallace Jr. 10th. He got stage points in both stages. Probably his best finish at Phoenix too, qualified 5th. Brad Keselowski from tailback after Cole Custer qualified his car for pit position. Came from tailback after the birth of his son, third child for the Keselowskis, comes back to finish 15th. Eric Jones, who had run up in the top 10 all day, didn't end up with the result he probably wanted, finished right behind his teammate Carson Hocevar in 19th and 20th for the last race for Legacy Motor Club with Chevrolet. Briscoe, I mentioned, had led 2 laps. His day went away when Kyle Busch basically used him up on the third stage restart. And then Christopher Bell got stage points in stage 1, but ended up dead last after brake failure and knocked himself out of the championship right then and there. He was the only car that fell out of the race of the 36 cars that started. So yeah, I mean, in the end, there was only 4 cautions, only 2 for incidents. So there was a relatively tame race, and in the end, it gave the opportunity for drivers who had long run cars to make their presence felt. That's where we saw the likes of Ross Chastain, Blaney, Buescher, and Harvick all come up there. Those were the 3 guys. I mean, Hamlin also, it's a track where he's done well at over the years. He fell short of this championship, and based on how everything landed yesterday, if he had been in the championship 4, he still would have fallen short. But in the end, it's YRB, the actual most popular driver in this sport, burned her down right in the front straightaway and gets this championship, 2 consecutive championships for Roger Penske. Ryan Blaney in this playoff put together a run and has now made a mark that he is something his dad hasn't done. And when you're the son for all these guys, I mean, you're a Dale Jr. fan, Josh, to be the son of a legendary driver, and Dave Blaney being the Buckeye Bullet, and all that he has done in sprint car racing, him and his family, his grandfather, Lou Blaney, his uncle, Dale Blaney, all of them in sprint car racing, and then Ryan doing it on pavement in stock cars. Dave essentially sacrificed that career in sprint car racing for a while to go and drive in NASCAR. And yesterday was the culmination of it all. You had Ryan Blaney crying in the car. You had Dave Blaney breaking down on almost going right on national TV because of how emotional he was for how much it meant to him to see his son get that championship on Sunday. Big deal for the Blaneys, big deal for Ford after what has been a brutal year for the Blue Ovals in NASCAR in general to get that championship for Ryan Blaney, while Ross Chastain also goes and gets a second victory of the year and moves into the offseason, a big offseason for Trackhouse Racing, and they're moving in with a lot of momentum and opportunities with the new sponsorship going on.
Yeah, I mean, Ryan Blaney, going out winning the title. I don't think we had him in the Final Four at all before the Final Four. Just didn't see it happening, until Martinsville. It was really hard to see, but he just kept persisting throughout the playoffs. He got that clutch win at Talladega that really set this up. I think he has to be thankful for the penalty at Las Vegas being rescinded. And everything, although he did win Martinsville, definitely changed that situation, made it easier to qualify for the Final Four. So there wasn't as much pressure to get into the Final Four. Had a good run at Homestead as well. So he definitely, even though maybe his season overall wasn't as good as maybe William Byron's season with the amount of wins and stuff and average finish and all that stuff that we kind of talk about from the traditional standpoint. He got it done in the last 3 rounds of the playoffs. Somebody we thought Fords weren't really going to have a whole lot of speed here in this playoff, and it would come down to Hendrick or Gibbs, but at the end of the day, a Ford and Roger Penske's team came out and won this title for the second year in a row. And a guy that's extremely popular among the fan base, somebody that has probably can have some I'm not going to say crossover appeal, but somebody that can help grow the sport. He's been on guest star on different TV shows in the past, and he's got he's been around things. He's somebody that the NASCAR needs to market a lot. Ryan Blaney, he's a huge Star Wars fan and all that stuff. So aspiring Jedi and all that. So he's definitely somebody that as a champion, I think, can help represent the sport and help it grow to a new audience and things like that. And he definitely has the history, like you said, with his family racing history and having tons of championships and on the dirt side, and his dad being a former stock car driver as well. So he's got a lot of history there. So I think he's going to be able to leverage all of that as he becomes a champion now and goes out and represents himself in that way. So I think he is definitely a deserving champion. I think throughout that race, he was the only car that really had anything to show that they're willing to race for the title. And William Byron, first half of the race was pretty good, but the first stage didn't really have much after that. So he didn't really have too much speed afterwards. It was like I think just getting settled in. Everybody made their adjustments after the first stage, and Byron was able to, wasn't able to keep up with the track as the track changed. So I think that was definitely a big factor as well. I think for Kyle Larson, had not had really a good good run compared to Blaney or Byron. But then they had the pit call in the last pit stop to get out in front of both his teammate and Blaney, and he was able to fight Blaney there for the first 10, 15 laps after the final caution. But Blaney was able to pull away, so Larson just never had the speed to be able to challenge on a long run. And then of course Christopher Bell went out too early, so it was you're never able to see what he could have done in this race. But Blaney was outside the top 10 for most of the first stage, and then at the after the first stage, he was able to get the adjustments that they needed, and he was able to race towards the front. Raced hard with Ross Chastain and Martin Truex Jr. there throughout that third and final stage. Bumped Chastain there in the middle of turn 1 and 2. So he's definitely racing hard. He's definitely struggling with that car for a good part of that race, but he was able to make it work. And even though he didn't win the race, he made the moves that he made to win the titles. So just a interesting race here. Of course, Chastain had the dominant car throughout the race and was able to win the title. We didn't see any BS caution at the end to change everything and give them all one more chance to fight for the championship and have the championship guy possibly win the race as well. And that streak has finally come to an end. So interesting from that perspective. And you mentioned, we talked about it last night as well with Chastain won the race, and Rick Allen was like, Ross Chastain goes down the backstretch for the final time, and then after that he just talked about Ryan Blaney, and it was probably maybe like 45 minutes before we even got an interview from Chastain there from Victory Lane. So good job to NBC for completely forgetting about. I know this championship guy, but there's a guy that won the race, and I feel like kind of throwback to the past and before this playoff era where we had the winner of the race be different than the title winner. And I think they ESPN and old NBC still gave they still gave coverage to the winner of the race, even though the champion was often a different guy. So they gave him their fair coverage. So NBC just completely botched it here with Chastain winning the race. So at least both those guys, Ryan Blaney, Ross Chastain, they both deserved to win the title in the race. So it was just an interesting race. It wasn't as boring as last year's championship finale. So I think there was enough that happened. I think they had a different tire on, so I think that improved it. But I still think I think you can agree with this as well, that Phoenix probably isn't the best place to hold a championship race. But for what it was yesterday, at least it was entertaining enough to at least get by. But I definitely think that there are way more deserving places like Homestead. If they could ever upgrade the facility, I guess, to make it look more prestigious, I guess, and have more, I guess, available for clientele to explore and stuff on the weekend like they do at Phoenix now. So, but at the end of the day, it's an interesting season, and Ryan Blaney is the champion, and now he gets to go throughout the off season, and grow the sport and reign as the champion for the next year.
Yeah, he finishes this season with 8 top 5s and 18 top 10s, which is probably a lower number. I would say definitely a lower number than what we usually see from a champion. It kind of trends with some of the recent champions, good or bad. But when you look at his season in general, you look at the last 6 races, he finished in the top 10 in 5 of them, no worse than 12th. 2 wins, 2 runner-up finishes, and a 6th. That was the Vegas race that Josh mentioned, where if that penalty hadn't been rescinded, I don't think we're talking about Ryan Blaney as a champion. you also add his top 10 at Darlington and Kansas. You had so it's I mean, you're talking about 8 of the 10 races in this playoff. He finished no worse than 12th. So I mean, that's not it's the most amazing statistics, but I'll say a lot of these guys would have taken what he did the last 6 races of the season, and walked away with it if they knew that they were going to end up with the hardware. I mean, this year, when you look at the start of the season for him, he had flashes of brilliance. He did have top 10s and runner-ups and top 5s through the first 13 races of the season, but he also had some really bad runs as well. Qualifying was in his favor, but they didn't come around with the finishes at some places. Talladega, of course, is one of his best racetracks. He always seems to trend there. Any type of drafting track, he trends well. So that's Daytona and Atlanta. Phoenix, he started 8th and finished 2nd in the spring. You look at Vegas, he improved his finish from the spring to the fall. You got Martinsville, he started 31st and finished 7th in the spring. So you think about that performance in a race where you couldn't even pass, using Strat and all that. Jonathan Hassler, in his 3rd year as a crew chief, 38 years old, is a champion in the Cup Series. And after Darlington, the first 13 races of the season, he had probably one of the best performances of his whole entire career, winning the Coca-Cola 600 at Charlotte, and then followed that up with a great run at Gateway. Didn't end up with the victory. Kyle Busch got that victory, but he led 83 laps in that race. And then from there, he went quiet for a while. Had a lot of bad finishes, went through a run of about 4 races and 6 where he had out 30th or worse. So he kind of went away there. But starting with Michigan, which was, you talk Michigan in August, for the exception, the 3 races, and there's those 3 races, Daytona, Bristol, and Texas. He was pretty consistent, not finishing outside of 13th in that run. So he was running up front when it counted. Even when he didn't have the best piece, he was able to make something out of it. He did have to sweat Bristol, even though it was a first round. It wasn't a great run for him, 2 laps down, but he made it through and got out of the first round, had a bad start to his second round and went out and won in a clutch situation. Did the same thing at Martinsville. Didn't need it theoretically, but he went out there and won. And, in the end, this is a format that they're given, and he has done what's necessary to become the NASCAR Cup Series champion in the end. We look at the point standings for this year in more detail. Kyle Larson ends up finishing 2nd in points by 1. William Byron finishes 3rd by 2 points. Christopher Bell 4th. Christopher Bell explodes a brake rotor early in the race and gets knocked out. He, just like last year, didn't have a great piece. It seemed during race day. Qualified all right, but it just wasn't there. He didn't have as good of, or he didn't qualify as well as he did last year, and then didn't seem to have the car. Larson and Byron qualified up front. Byron, of course, on the pole. Byron was the dominant figure in terms of wins. He won more races than anyone, tied with Larson for the most top 5s, had the most top 10s. Larson, to me, it's interesting, Josh. I really feel like he wasn't. There was times where he kind of disappeared, And it wasn't as bad as last year where he really wasn't a factor after coming off of dominating in 21. The stats show that he was there a lot more than he was last year. But I think I just expect when everyone you consider he's like the inbred's hero, and everyone says he's the greatest race car driver that exists. And theoretically, I mean, the argument can be made for him or Fish Lips or he's in that mix for sure. But he wasn't the closing mentality, the being able to go out there and kind of dominate races. It isn't the same as it was a couple of years ago for him. And yesterday in that race, he really wasn't a factor at all. And he ends up finishing second in points, but he wasn't the second best driver in general. I mean, if you're going to go and take the whole season into account, and if they did it that way, then I guess he would have been up there. I don't know what the old stats show, the old point standings would have been if you did a full season, but Larson ends up kind of wondering what might have been. I think William Byron definitely does, because he led the first 92 laps of the race, and it went away from him. I think he was the one that walked into Phoenix thinking, if I could put together a good run, I can end up winning this deal. He qualified on pole. Rudy Fugle did what he could to call the race for him. Joe and I talked about it once I finally got internet. That's 2 sacks in a row. That if they had brought the tire, it would have been good. If they had brought the Martinsville tire, I think we'd have had an even better race. But of course, the turnaround time, I was thinking that like the turnaround time was too quick, and they probably committed to these shitty tires that they had, and that's why I didn't have that option. If they had a better tire, it could have been a much better race, and who knows what would have happened. But for what they gave, the Hendrick guys qualified up front at the start of the weekend. They were given a full practice for whatever reason for the final race, but they say they can't do it at other races, which is bullshit. But Ryan Blaney during that practice showed that he had great long run speed too. And it wasn't a surprise when we came to Sunday afternoon that when the race started, even though he didn't have a great qualifying run, he didn't really qualify that great at Martinsville either, but he had a great long run car and he came up front. And, but for the other 3 guys, the Hendrick Motorsports guys, probably they thought that they were the favorite going in, Josh, and they're left wanting. And Christopher Bell, 2 years in a row, gets to the Final Four, but when they get to that final race, him and Adam Stevens haven't figured out the magic combination the way that Adam Stevens and Kyle Busch have done twice in their careers together, winning championships.
I mean, I'll start, with what you said about Kyle Larson, and I think for him, the early portion of the season, the early part of the spring, like up until the summer, I think he had the best car on pace, but he had, I think, like a 3 or 4 week span where something happened to him, where he was either leading or running top 5, or had an opportunity and something happened where he either got taken out or had a part failure or something like that. So I mean, he was probably the better driver in the spring, and then throughout the summer kind of faded. Started to come back with Pocono and had a chance to win there, but got taken out by Denny Hamlin and all that stuff. And then I mean, honestly, I think his season from a performance standard was probably on par with Ryan Blaney at the end of the day, but then Ryan Blaney was just the one that ended up being better than him in the championship race. But for Larson, I think in the old standings in the Winston Cup format, he would have finished in 6th place in the Winston Cup standings. And then there's somebody on Twitter that's been keeping track of what it would look like if it was the Winston Cup style standings, and then the non-playoff standings, just like, without a playoff format, but the current point system, Larson would have finished in 5th. So, he's up there, but, he's definitely, not, up there with William Byron or Denny Hamlin. And I think, Larson, I mean, he was in the top 10 for most of the race, but wasn't doing anything with it. So, I mean, he had a solid run, but, just, I don't think it was, championship level or anything like that. And then, of course, Byron, led the first stage and, most of the first part of the race, but then faded away after that. And it's kind of similar to how his race in the spring ended up. Remember, he, back in the spring at Phoenix, he led the first part of that race and then ended up fading away from that until the end where he won. So, and that was only because of a late caution there with, a handful of laps to go. And, for that, most of that race, Larson was the guy, and then Harvick had ended up having the better long run car in that one. So, definitely for Byron, I think he has to go back and wonder if they should have planned for more of the long run, especially with Phoenix getting strung out and having long green flag runs there. So I think that's definitely a strategy call that you have to consider there for Byron. Of course, with Blaney mixing it up with the non-contenders, Chastain and Martin Truex, and Harvick to an extent. Of course, I think he was still racing with the mentality for Blaney to win the race, to win the title, which I think, it showed it wasn't necessary. And then, Byron's team encouraging him to still keep pressing forward, with, Blaney potentially using up his tires on that, long run, to open up an opportunity there for either Byron or Larson. So you had that factor as well, because Blaney raced hard with Chastain and with Martin Truex, so could have used up a lot of his tires there and have an opportunity to lose the race and lose ground to Larson, who was about 2 seconds behind him when that stuff was happening in the final stage. And then Byron was right there, so there's still an opportunity, but those two just didn't have it at the end of the day. And of course, Byron, I think, based on the full season standings, if we still went by that, he would have been the champion by 8 points over Denny Hamlin, who ironically ended up on the last caution taking 2 tires to try to gamble on track position, I guess, to try to be the guy that won the final race. And he was up there. The restart at the end showed him fighting for the lead with Blaney, who he had that bit of a tussle with at Homestead, and then Larson was right there, who they had their deal back at Pocono. So a lot of the storylines from the second half of the year right there up front, and of course Chastain was up there as well, and William Byron. So just interesting performance from the Hendrick team. They kind of, I guess maybe they are betting on shorter runs being the deal, hoping for a late caution where they would work out better in the short run, whereas Blaney was definitely set up on that long run. So I think with Phoenix being the way it is, I think setting up the cars on the long run was definitely the way to go in there, and then definitely it paid off for Blaney. So I think all 4 of these guys, they definitely put in a good effort there. I mean, we haven't really talked much about Bell, but it's hard to really talk about Bell with how his race ended up being, and never really was truly a factor in this race because of the brake issues that he had, but which is unfortunate because I think if he ever makes it to the final race, we've seen what he's been able to do at the end of races, like we saw at Homestead a few weeks ago. So definitely all these guys could have won the title if things went their way, and of course only Blaney gets to say that. So definitely a interesting race, and I think it was we'll get into it later with the trucks, but definitely a lot of, especially at the end with 30 to go, Blaney and Larson fighting each other, and then the final restart and the battle with Chastain and Blaney. I think that was definitely a good battle, clean racing. Didn't have any dust ups or any dirty driving or anything like that. So unlike what we saw in the truck race. Definitely a lot of clean racing there.
Yeah, I was trying to look up the old point standings thing. I found a Reddit link which was based on the Latford system, and it was interesting when you were talking about the points, how they landed. There is a Reddit post with the Latford system, and it shows Martin Truex, which tells you what was going on in the regular season. Martin Truex was a regular season champion, and how his season basically went in the toilet in the last 10 weeks. Even with how bad he performed in the last 10 weeks, under the original points format, he would have won the championship. And then you consider Kyle Busch, the way he was basically for the second half of the season, he wasn't a factor for a good amount of it. This point standing shows that he would have been second. So it's crazy how we look at, I mean, there's different points formats and also it would have been 3 Gibbs cars in the top 4. Then you have Hendrick, William Byron would have been 5th. Kevin Harvick 6th, Ross Chastain, Larson, Keselowski, and Chris Buescher. So that's interesting. Ryan Blaney would have been 12th. So it's insane to look at with the Latford system under the way things went. Now, we always have to go and qualify it. Would they have raced differently, et cetera, et cetera? We can't say one way or the other. But Ryan Blaney in the end gets the championship. Roger Penske gets 2 consecutive championships. And this format, for better or worse, is what we have. The fact that we're going to continue going to this shithole at Phoenix and at being the final race, we're stuck with that too. So we have to take it for what it is. But for the guy who is the most popular driver, honestly the most popular driver in NASCAR, he gets the championship. He gets to go home with his smoking hot Hooters model girlfriend and partying with Bubba and Hemrick and Clyde and his whole crew. Brad Keselowski congratulated him coming back from the birth of his son. Him and Paige comes back, races, gets a good finish, gets to congratulate one of the guys that he played a role in their career. You look at this Cup Series and how many drivers. Oh Jesus! That was insane. It almost was insanely bad by Zach Wilson there, but how Brad Keselowski Racing. You look at how many drivers drove for that organization that are now in the Cup Series and have had success. You think about Blaney, of course, Tyler Reddick, Ross Chastain, the 2 main guys, the 2 guys that were the factors in this race yesterday, both drove for Brad Keselowski. So, I mean, you think about, there's 2 guys that have played as big of a role as anybody in nurturing talent in NASCAR in recent memory, and those are Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Brad Keselowski. For them 2 guys, and I guess to a lesser extent Kyle Busch. If it weren't for those 3 guys, where would we be? And Kyle Busch now is selling out finally, largely because the business model in the Truck Series has gotten worse and worse. He's worried more about Brexton's career. Chevy isn't giving him the money that Toyota was giving him. So he has a reason to sell out now, and that's what he's doing. Brad, it finally got bad enough for him that he had to get out of there a while ago, and largely it also helped that they were building their family too. So I think he was more committed to wanting to be a father, and then now, of course, he is committed to having a team, albeit being a Cup Series owner or part owner. And then you have Dale Jr., who continues to run his organization and continues to look for, look for the opportunity to maybe get a charter, which the Phelps and company said that they weren't going to take away Rick Ware's charter, which is BS. They should have, and then just said to Dale Jr., here you go. You can go and run. You just won't be able to run Hendrick equipment, or I don't know how the ownership structure will be, but you'll just run a Hendrick satellite. You'll be running a fifth Hendrick car. But that's what they should have done. They won't. It's why we're going to have 3 Spire cars next year, but it is what it is. The final point standings, actual point standings, Blaney, Larson, Byron, Bell, Dennis Hamlin finishes 5th. By 39 points over his driver, Tyler Reddick. Christopher Buescher, Brad Keselowski, Ross Chastain, and Darrell Wallace Jr. round out the top 10. Martin Truex Jr., who won the regular season points championship, ends up 11th in the standings. Defending series champion Joey Logano 12th. Kevin Harvick 13th in his final year. Kyle Busch, Michael McDowell, and Richard finishes 16th. Clyde 17th. Keebler Gibbs, the 2023 Cup Series Rookie of the Year by default. Suarez and Alex Bowman round out the top 20 in points. Briscoe ended up 30th, finished 9 points behind Bald Spot Dylan, and that's with the 100 and 200 point penalty or whatever the fuck he had. There was some craziness after the 600. 3 Stewart-Haas cars, 22nd, 23rd, and 30th in standings, and 13th was the best. That's the last thing. Kevin Harvick, Josh, had his final race of his Cup career, legendary career, 60 wins, and had chances this year to win. It was very limited compared to some of his great seasons. But Kevin Harvick, at a track where he's won more than anybody 9 times, led, was a factor to possibly win, similar to what Jimmy Johnson did in his final race of his Cup career. Arguably had the best car, but was told to not win. In the end, for Kevin Harvick, he leaves this sport. He's the last driver that can say he had a connection, had some sort of connection with Dale Earnhardt. He is the last of an era, really. If you think about those years, that time of the drivers that came in, you had Smoke, you had Jimmy, you had Dale Jr., Matt Kenseth, then and Harvick. I mean, to a lesser extent, Nonek. I'm trying to think who else was. Nonek and Johnson were in 2002, and Harvick was 2001. And Dale Jr. And
Kenseth.
Matt Kenseth were in 2000. Tony was 1999. And then I don't really remember before that. I think Kenny Irwin is 98. And I don't remember offhand. I'd have to look it up again. But that was the era. You think about all those guys. And Kurt Busch, there's the one that I had forgotten, my fault on that. Kurt Busch was the last guy that erased Dale Earnhardt. Got flipped off by the Intimidator in the 500. All these guys were the Gillette Young Guns, and that was an era. And now that era ends. And you think about it: 826 Cup starts, 60 wins, 251 top 5s, 444 top 10s, 31 poles, and in 23 years of Cup racing, he ran 21 years in the Xfinity Series, won 47 races, 186 top 5s, and 261 top 10s, average finish of 8.4. in that series. Average finish of 12.8 in Cup. And, of course, the 2014 Cup Series champion, two-time Xfinity Series champion, and in the Truck Series as a driver, drove 124 races over 19 seasons with 14 wins, 48 top fives, and 62 top tens. Average finish of 12.6. But I think his greater contribution was as a truck owner for KHI. Him and Delana built that organization, and Ron Hornaday Jr., who was his mentor, drove for him amongst others, and won a bunch of championships, 2 championships for him, and won a lot of races, and is the actual winningest driver in the Truck Series, because I mean, for an actual driver who drove the series, not Kyle Busch who cherry picked. So I mean, you look at this career, he had 350 and won, so 450, 25, 475, and I mean over 1,200 starts in NASCAR, and 107 plus, 121 wins. First ballot Hall of Famer, is not leaving the sport because he's going to be in the announce booth. Somebody who's been a representative, somebody who's been outspoken over the years, but has become more of an elder statesman, one that's trying to be one for the drivers and understands it from both sides, as a driver, as an owner, and is trying to make this sport better, while in turn he's trying to build the next generation with his son, who has aspirations to have a future in motorsports somewhere. You could see all the friends and all the people that were there. Tony hasn't been at the track a whole lot all year, but this weekend he was. And largely because it was probably for Kevin. Yeah, of course, they had a guy in the Xfinity Series. We'll talk about it in a moment. But Kevin Harvick leaves a big void in this sport. And leaving with 60 wins and leaving as a champion and as a contender, he leaves a big mark. And from humble beginnings in Bakersfield, California, to being one of the great drivers in the history of this sport, Kevin Harvick's done it all. And now he moves on to his next step in his career as a announcer in NASCAR and Cup and Xfinity. So we'll see how that all goes. But Kevin Harvick, it's end of an era for sure, Josh.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an end of an era. You know, the guy that when he started, so here's something, when he started his career in NASCAR, his first start in Rockingham, Steve Park in the number 1 DEI car won. And then today or yesterday, when Ross Chastain won in the number 1, which was, formerly, the number 1 DEI car that merged with Chip Ganassi and is now owned by Trackhouse. That number 1 won the race. So what a interesting bookend there, between 22 years in this series that he ran and running, starting out running for RCR and then switched over to Stewart-Haas in 2014. And just his run from 2014 on was a really good career, almost like a entirely different career that he had when he was at RCR. He often carried that team at RCR when he was good. He had 1 year at RCR where he should have won the title in 2010, and 2011, 2013 had good years as well. But then 2014 onwards, he was a completely different driver at Stewart-Haas all the way up until 2020. And Harvick only won in 2014. Probably should have won the title a few years after that, we talk about the playoffs, how the playoffs kind of robbed Jeff Gordon of a few titles that he should have had. Well, I think the playoff era definitely robbed Kevin Harvick of at least 2 to 3 titles. You can definitely argue that he should have been the champion in 2010, 2015, 16, and probably 2020 as well. So definitely shows the faults of the system with the one race championship. Even Harvick said it himself after 2020 that this system with the way it is doesn't reward, or it doesn't make championships as meaningful. I don't remember the exact quote, but basically said that in this system the championships aren't as meaningful as they were back in the pre-Chase era, and even some of the Chase era. So definitely should have had more titles, but it's something that we'll have to ponder for the amount of wins that he had. He's only had one title, which I guess in this format does show that it is really hard to win the championship in this series. That we've never had we've had a repeat champion. Kyle Busch and Joey Logano both won multiple times in this playoff championship format, but it's definitely very hard to especially in this next gen era to have a back-to-back, or even somebody that has won for the second time, which shows that it's really hard. But Harvick in his career, he's been really dominant, and he's going to be a good broadcaster, and so I think he'll definitely bring back some reason and balance to the booth and Fox alongside Clint Boyer. So looking forward to hearing him next year, I guess, and being in the booth the first half of the year. But definitely a void left here in the Cup Series. But definitely the veteran presence is taking a step below now. I think Kyle Busch is going to be the guy that's the senior member of the garage. So now that's been passed down from him to Kyle Busch. So definitely looking forward to seeing how he is in retirement and everything. And another thing that you talked about with his Truck Series team, well, he ended up shutting it down to focus on his family, but at the same time that also became a management company, and he's representing drivers and other entities and celebrities. So that's another thing that he did in his career that I think they'll definitely leave a mark in terms of being able to, I guess, with public relations and being able to start up that. So, and that's definitely been a resource for the drivers. So I think you have to bring that up too. But definitely a void and a presence that is not going to be here on the track next season.
Yeah, and it's something that it's hard to, we talk about it every year. We've been talking about it recently, replacing big time drivers. It's a part of motorsports. You can't race forever in that sense. I guess John Force disproves that notion, but you can't race forever. You can't stay competitive forever and be in factor. But for Kevin Harvick, he gets to leave generally as someone who was up there till the end. It wasn't the way he wanted to end his last few years. The last couple of years have not been as good as it had been, but it's a transitional time, not only for him in his life and his career, but also for Stewart-Haas as an organization. A lot of soul searching will have to be done, and we'll talk about it more later once we get into the Cup Series review, season review, and the teams that made progress versus teams that went the other way. And what the prospects are going into 2024. Ford ends up the champion. It definitely didn't look like that was going to be the case. They've brought out a new body style, new Mustang body for 2024, and we will see how that works relative to the Chevrolet Camaro and the Toyota Camry. But it's something that if they want to be a factor, they want to have something to do with this deal, and be something every week, not some weeks, giving the guys a chance, they're going to have to make some big changes in general. But for Kevin Harvick, you'll get to talk about him every week in the booth. All right, let's move on to the Xfinity Series. Pretty tame race. I mean, there were 8 cautions, 2 for stages, and then 6 actual cautions. But when it comes to the drivers that were up front, the vast majority of those drivers stayed up front all day. There was only one real instance of a driver that was up front that didn't end up that way, and that was one of the final 4 drivers. The championship 4 in the Xfinity Series was John Hunter Nemechek, Justin Allgaier, Sam Mayer, and Cole Custer. In the end, Cole Custer started 7th. He got 2nd in stage 1, won stage 2, led the most laps, and ends up as an Xfinity Series champion after twice finishing runner-up in this series at Homestead at one of his better racetracks. Phoenix has been, kind of been around, but not one of the best. Cole Custer goes out there, gets that elusive championship for Stewart-Haas Racing for himself. After a season where he probably was that maybe 4th driver, 3rd or 4th driver there. You had John Hunter Nemechek, you had Justin Allgaier. And Austin Hill were the 3 drivers that really stood out at the start for the good part of the season. And then Austin Hill dropped himself out because, he's a dick and a choker. And so he disappeared. So that opened the door for Cole Custer, who had been that next guy for a good amount of the season. And he made something of the situation and put himself in a place to get that. He had to that last lap incident between Sheldon Creed and Austin Hill, he had to put his car in reverse and get across the line. If he hadn't done that, he wouldn't have been in the championship 4. So we go into that. The results of the Xfinity Series Championship race: Cole Custer, Sheldon Creed gets another runner-up finish to end his RCR tenure. Justin Allgaier 3rd, Riley Herbst 4th, continuing the great momentum that started after winning at Vegas. Sam Mayer finishes 5th, so 3 of the 4 drivers in the final 4 finished in the top 5. Josh Berry in his last race for Junior Motorsports finishes 6th. Austin Hill 7th. Chandler Smith 8th. Sammy Smith 9th after qualifying on pole. Won the race in the spring at Phoenix. And then Kaz Gralla rounded out the top 10. The Jordan Anderson cars 12th and 13th with Burton and Retzloff. Rajah Caruth started 13th, finished 14th for Rick Hendrick in the 17 car. So solid run for him. We will see what that means for 2024 since he doesn't have any plans as of now. Oh, he's wide open and he caught it. That was Keenan Allen was left wide open, and Justin Herbert goes and sails him one. Oh, what a catch. Falling down, and he got that. And then getting in through Dawson Cram, former guest on the show, gets a top 20 finish for SS Greenlight. Then you look through some of these others. Snyder had issues, was up front, but then had issues. Brett Moffitt got a stage point, finished 15. And then John Hunter Nemechek, who yet again in a spot where he had been a dominant figure during the season, put himself in a place to possibly win a championship, gets to the final race of the championship and disappears. Yeah, he led the second most laps, but the results show a 28th place result for him. It wasn't as bad as what happened to him in the Truck Series when they gave it away there, but John Hunter Nemechek left wanting. Would have joined his father as a champion in the series. It's been rare seeing fathers and sons win championships in NASCAR. It's the Jarretts did it, and that's, I mean, brothers have done it, of course, with the Labanis in the Cup Series. I'm trying to think offhand other like family that have won championships together and or fathers and sons, and I can't really think of any off the top of my head. So that would have been great for John Hunter, but unfortunately that didn't come off. But I guess in the end, Cole Custer getting his 13th career Xfinity Series victory, and the biggest one of his career, because he is now an Xfinity Series champion, and they have announced that he's coming back in 2024. When you look at what's going on at Stewart-Haas Racing, you would think that he just came off of winning an Xfinity championship and proving himself under the circumstances, saying himself that it was a demotion, and he went out there and clutched up and won the championship and beat one guy who's going to the Cup Series next year full time, and two guys at Junior Motorsports, and another guy who was a dominant figure for a good amount of the season until the playoff, really. Cole Custer goes out there and gets the job done.
Yeah, he gets the job done in the final race of the year. Throughout the year, there were times when Cole Custer was the best guy, but then, there was a lot of times where, he wasn't the best driver throughout the series. The first part of the year really wondered, what type of, season he was going to have. Didn't have a top 10 or a top 5 until Richmond in April. So, it took a while for him to get his season going. But, ended up, kind of kickstarting his year. He won at Portland and one at Chicago, which was postponed. So his first 2 wins this year were on road courses, and had an okay year by most standards and everything, but somehow made it to the final race. Homestead, which I saw he was dominant then, but then hit the wall. But made it to the final race, and then just had a dominant race there, and was able to win the race, and actually the only driver that won the championship that also won the race. So good performance by him. Of course, had the best car, and it showed that not necessarily the best driver throughout the year, but the guy with the best car ended up winning the championship in the final race. And excellent restart there on the final restart. Was able to 3-wide battle with Sheldon Creed and Justin Allgaier on the final restart there in overtime, and able to use the high line to get around Justin Allgaier and continue on with the race. And win. So for him, I mean, of course, we view it. A lot of fans probably view it as a demotion for him, going back to the Xfinity Series. But sometimes you got to be able to go back and bring yourself back up. We saw with John Hunter Nemechek, it started out 2020 in the Cup Series, but 2021, 2022 in the trucks, and Xfinity competed in this year, and now is going to go back to the Cup Series with Legacy Motor Clubs. So, now there's always an opportunity for Cole Custer, to potentially go back to the Cup Series in a few years if the right opportunity lines up. And this is a great way for him to rebuild his resume and show himself and other sponsors and owners and other drivers that he's still capable of winning races, and certainly now he's a championship caliber driver. So wins the first title for Stewart Haas. Of course, a couple years ago Chase Briscoe had that opportunity but wasn't able to bring it in. But now he has the first title for Stewart Haas and Xfinity Series competition. So now he gets to go and try to repeat what he did this year, and try to have a more dominant year to prove that he's actually a good driver here in the Xfinity Series.
Yeah, and we don't know what SHR is going to do with the 10 car, but we've kind of there's been rumors and it looks like a certain dumbass is going to get that car. I've never been the biggest Cole Custer guy, but this year he did what he had to do. And when you go past John Hunter Nemechek and Hill and Allgaier, he was the best driver. He was there every single race, and he lingered and he did what he had to do. And his combination with him and his crew chief, I think, is one that has a staying power. And Stewart Haas over the years has put together, you look at it with, of course, Harvick and Childers. You look at with Tony, not as much in Tony's time because him and Darian ended up, not staying together. It worked out initially, but it didn't work out. It worked out for the one championship. Gibson and Nonek. And then you think about for Chase Briscoe and Boswell, they put together. I mean, Zippy. I think it's part of what Zippy does is putting those combinations together, and he's been over time. I think he's been pretty good at that, more times than not, and so. Jonathan Tony going there and working with Cole Custer first year as a crew chief full time, and he goes out and gets this championship, a huge deal for the organization as a whole. In a down year for Stewart Haas Racing, to go and get that championship is a big credit to that whole team. And so that's something that we have to look at. And Stewart Haas Racing will have a 2-car organization again next year with Cole Custer, with Riley Herbst. And they have a lot of momentum going into 2024. Because one's a champion and the other was probably one of the best drivers in the last 4 or 5 races of the season. So they're going to be a bigger factor possibly in 2024 than they even. Oh man, that's so bad. That is such a terrible sack. To take, that is. I mean, good sack by the Chargers of Anaheim, Alameda, and other counties, but we'll go move forward into the Truck Series. And my goodness, if you go, or let me just get into the points first before we get into Truck Series because it was nauseating. Custer by 6 over Allgaier, by 8 over Sam Mayer, and John Hunter Nemechek finishes 4th, -31. Austin Hill's inbred ass finished 5th. Sammy Smith somehow or another finished 6th. Wow. Creed 7th. Daniel Hemrick, Chandler Smith, Parker Kligerman, Josh Berry, and Jeb Burton rounded out the playoff drivers, and Riley Herbst, first of the drivers outside. Buckshot Jones and Brett Moffitt. You look at the top 3 guys are going to return, and 4 of the top 5. Sammy Smith's moving over to Junior Motorsports. Sheldon Creed's going to Gibbs. Hemrick is going to the Cup Series. Chandler Smith, I think, is going to Gibbs as well. So Kligerman will be staying. Barry's going to the Cup Series. Burton will stay. Herbst, Buckshot Jones will both be in the Xfinity Series. So as it stands, and Parker Retzloff as well. So a lot of the drivers that were up in the top of the points, you look at the top 16, and I mean, Ryan Sieg is another one. A lot of these drivers are going to be coming back next year. So there's going to be continuity, which I would say would be or they're going to switch to organizations that have shown success over time, which I think speaks to a series that has a lot of potential to continue to put on the best racing amongst the top 3 major NASCAR series. All right, so the Truck Series finale was definitely interesting. I think in terms of the 3 champions, the person that ended up winning the championship got the most inebriated, which fits his MO, because I think it's the only time he ever drinks. On a night where I think the driver that had probably been the most dominant driver for a good amount of the season put himself in a place to win, and was in a place to win the championship. He ends up making himself look like a fool, but he wasn't the only one. That's really all I can say. It was one of the ugliest races I've ever seen. It was one of the stupidest races, I think, to ever watch or ever have anything to do with. And if you were someone that was involved in that race in some way, shape, or form, or covering it, or it was an embarrassment to motorsports. You didn't even have the announcers there. Your lead announcer sounds like a complete dolt. You had one of the analysts just basically talking about nothing. It was just really bad. You had drivers going out there and intentionally running over each other. I mean, it was pathetic, really. There's just horrendous racing. 29 laps of overtime, which is absolutely unheard of, and quite frankly ridiculous. But in the end, you had 4 drivers coming into this race with the other series, of course. Corey Heim, Carson Hocevar, Glenn Enfinger, Ben Rhodes. And Ben Rhodes is now a 2-time Truck Series champion. He joins the likes of Ron Hornaday Jr., Jack Sprague, Matt Crafton, Todd Bodine. He is the 5th driver to win multiple championships in the Truck Series. And it's amazing that that's the case, really, because he really wasn't that good. I mean, he needed a tiebreaker at Homestead to make the Final Four over Nick Sanchez. And you look at Nick Sanchez, if he had been in there, he wouldn't have won it. He would have been 3rd. Grant Enfinger would have won the damn champion, or he had actually been 2nd, the way things landed. But just unbelievable. Christian Eckes in the end led the third most laps in the race. There were really 4 drivers that had good vehicles throughout the night. Eckes choked it at Homestead and regrets it even more because in the end he comes out with the victory, and he would have been a champion as he was in the ARCA series a few years ago. His teammate Jake Garcia in his last race for Bill McAnally gives him a 1-2 finish, first one he's ever had in the trucks. Chase Purdy in his last race for Kyle Busch, or the last race of Kyle Busch Motorsports, finishes third. Jesse Love, who hit everything but the lottery, finished fourth. The ARCA Series champion, driving his last race for Toyota before he goes to RCR. Ben Rhodes fifth. Grant Enfinger finishes sixth, and at one point was in position to win the championship if it weren't for one of the yellows, I think, which was triggered by one of these championship 4. Dean Thompson, Caden Honeycutt, Tanner Gray, Nick Sanchez were rounded out the top 10, and Rajah Caruth, consistent during the weekend, gets qualifies decent in both races, qualifies all right in both races, and 12th place finish for Rajah in his last race in the last race for GMS. So you look at GMS racing, Grant Enfinger falls just one spot short, and you have Rajah finishing 12th. Ty Majeski led the most laps, won a stage, finished 14th. Corey Heim, who we'll talk about more in a few moments' time, won one stage, qualified on pole, led the second most laps, finished 18th. And you had Taylor Gray there, and Zane Smith in his final race for Front Row Motorsports and for Ford before he moves to the Cup Series for Trackhouse and Spire. Started 4th, finished in the top 5 both stages, led 35 laps, but ended up in a wreck. And then Carson Hocevar finished 29th. He was up front for a good part of the day, and but in the end ended up on a rollback. I mean, there were a bunch of incidents, Josh. It was really ridiculous. It was a demo derby. Marco Andretti and Chris Hacker ran over each other early. Jake Drew and Connor Jones in a battle of Daddy's Money guys ran over each other later. Daniel Dye was the innocent bystander in Bailey Curry and Stephen Parsons' squabble in their argy-bargy. Derek Kraus wrecked with Jack Wood, I think. Or Derek Kraus wrecked, and then Jack Wood ran a few more laps and wrecked himself. Sean Hingarani, who was driving for the 75 team that usually is driven by Parker Kligerman. I'm forgetting what their sponsor usually is. The Country Foods or whatever team or whatever, and he was god awful. Stuart Friesen got spun out at least twice, I think, in that race. And, I mean, there was some really atrocious racing. It was an embarrassment. I've said it over and over again, but that's really what it was. And Ben Rhodes got shit-faced, was wearing jewelry, looked like freaking Flava Flav. And that's an interception by Zach Wilson in a touchdown. Oh, there's a flag, but they're still up 2 touchdowns, so we'll see. But Ben Rhodes, champion, Christian Eckes, a win, and he'll be coming back to the Truck Series next year. And that's one of the only things that we know for sure with the Truck Series going into 2024. So Ben Rhodes will be back, and he'll be defending his championship. That I don't think with 40 to go, or with 20 to go in the actual race, he thought he was going to be the champion. But it worked out that once all that went and finished out, he ends up with the hardware, Josh, and that's really all that matters, giving Ford a sweep of the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that we can talk about here and how this all ended up happening. Honestly, the truck race was up until the point when Carson Hocevar spun out Corey Heim. It was your typical truck race, and relatively tame-ish. We still had accidents and stuff, but it didn't didn't go down to what it ended up turning out to be. So there was, it still turned out to be okay up until that point, and that's kind of where things just took a turn and went wide open. Carson Hocevar took too much going into the first turn and didn't expect Corey Heim to kind of turn down in his path, and then he spun out Corey Heim and put him in the wall and took out Stuart Friesen. And then from there, we just had a series of cautions after cautions, and we were gonna have a green flag run there at the very end, but then with a 12 lap run, and then Corey Heim decided to take out Carson Hocevar with 3 laps to go, and really just made it ridiculous there. And Carson Hocevar was on good tires and was going to pass Heim there on the backstretch, but Heim just turned right and put him in the wall there. And Grant Enfinger was leading at that point, and it looked like it was going to be his title. It looked like Ben Rhodes wasn't going to have an opportunity to go win the title, and then that caution happened and opened things up. And it was interesting, the juxtaposition of Grant Enfinger in the press conference just saying it's unfortunate, while Corey Heim was right there in the same room, and then just afterwards the look that he was giving to Corey Heim in that hallway there in the press conference room. So just a lot of things that happened that shouldn't have happened in that truck race. Ben Rhodes had problems shifting in the final couple of restarts. Zane Smith got into it with Jack Wood, and also with Ben Rhodes there. So Rhodes ended up getting into the back of Zane Smith and spun him out, and then Matt Crafton and a bunch of other guys spun out on the next caution, and then Tyler Ingram had a flat tire coming to the white flag, and they didn't throw a caution for that because I think NASCAR was like, yeah, we can't have this last any longer. This race started at 10 p.m. Eastern time, and it's almost, it's ended like almost right on the dot at 1 o'clock a.m. Eastern time. So just a lot of, things that happened. Definitely a Charlie Foxtrot of a race right there. But a lot of drivers had things to say, and even reporters had stuff to say. I mean, Denny Hamlin said, this is what happens when there's no rules, no officiating. You get a product like this. The show is taking over U.S. motorsports, and that's why it's hard to take seriously. Matt Weaver was like, I sometimes in moments like these think about how John King won a Truck Series race at Daytona in 2012. Let's see who else. Tyler Reddick was like, this dumbass will never learn, referring to Carson Hocevar. Chris Buescher said, what a pitiable lack of sportsmanship when Corey Heim put Hocevar into the wall. Josh Berry was like, what a disaster. And a bunch of our other drivers just chiming in, of course, along with all the fans and everything. So that's just how bad of a race it was when everybody was crashing like every 5 laps, and just set a standard of what not to do in a championship race here in the top 3 series of NASCAR. And definitely a clean race in Xfinity and Cup. Definitely at least made it made it look a little. I mean, this truck race is bad, but as the whole weekend, slightly less bad. So, yeah, this definitely a lot of drivers here, feel like we've never heard of, and compared to who short track racers, compared to what they can do, guys that don't really have a lot of respect and don't really know anything and go in here and just wreck stuff, and that's why Kyle Busch is out of the series after this year. That's why Brad Keselowski doesn't have a truck team anymore. That's why Harvick is probably out of the truck series because you have people like this just tearing up equipment every week. So it's just pitiful to see this race end up like this. And of course, the other part of this is just how Corey Heim just kind of took upon himself to ruin the championship for Grant Enfinger, and Heim had the best car all year or truck all year, but then goes out and puts the Hocevar on the wall and completely changes the entire race right there, and it looked like Enfinger was on his way to winning the title there. Ben Rhodes didn't have anything left for him, and then Enfinger almost won it, but just came up short. Rhodes had his damage and everything, and Enfinger went and put on tires and was able to close in on him and get up to 6th, but wasn't able to get ahead of Rhodes there. So, just a really terrible race from that perspective. And then, of course, from the championship 4 perspective, Ben Rhodes wasn't even the best driver, period, here. It hasn't won since May. That was the only win he had was at Charlotte in the truck race there, all the way back in May. Let's see what else. It hasn't done anything really. Until Homestead, he was able to stay out on old tires and leapfrog his way into the Final Four, and didn't lead any major categories statistically in the truck series. Pretty much every other category, wins, top 5s, top 15s, top 10s, top 20s, top 25s, average start poles, stage wins, consecutive top 3, consecutive top 5s, top, pretty much every single statistic that you could come up with in the NASCAR Truck Series. Ben Rhodes was not even a category leader in anything, and he has somehow won the championship. So, not to take away from anything from him, of course, the press conference was entertaining and everything, but just shows the how bad the series is. So, with the type of drivers that race in it, and the ones that do race well, either something happens to them or they end up having somebody else mess up their race. So, yeah, just a lack of respect, lack of for everything, for racing, for drivers, for themselves. So terrible product. So I mean, I don't really know what else to say about it, but yeah, I think that's the one that left everybody like really emotional, especially because of just how embarrassing it ended and everything like that.
Yeah, as we get to 2 minutes to go in the Monday Night Football game with the Jets down 21 points with 3 turnovers on the night. It is a 2-minute warning now. And both teams will end up being 4-4 at the halfway point after 2 minutes here. That's Quinnen Williams just looks absolutely over it. And got Sauce Gardner, a bunch of them other guys. They're like, what the fuck? Yeah, so I mean, that's what you'd say about that race. Yeah, on Friday is what the fuck as well. I mean, Corey Heim, I think he definitely has a future in this sport. He'll be another example of Kyle Busch driver that that got up to the big time for him and for the what the hell is that team? Tricon It's a breakout season, and so there was it was something to see that all year. But when it came down to it, he got cleaned out by Carson Hocevar. Completely understand that. Carson Hocevar had this dopey look and actions and all that. The whole woe is me thing, which people had accused Ross Chastain of, and I think after Darlington, he kind of had to have soul search, and he became a lot less aggressive, and in turn, he probably wasn't as big of a factor, but he went through the better part of the back part of the season without really ruffling any feathers, and ended up with a victory to end the season. You have to learn at some point. It may end up with him being put in the fence more often. He's going to be in the Cup Series next year. Carson Hocevar. He did well for Legacy for his run that he had with them to end the year, but his actions speak louder than words, and he cleaned out. I mean, he just used Corey Haim up, and it isn't a good look. And then he had a chance to go and either, take that and say, all right, I effed up, and move forward and make a good restart and get away. Not only did he not make a good restart, he basically dropped anchor, and his mental strength was questionable, and he put himself in a position to have what happened to him go on. Corey Haim cleaned him out, used him up. Everybody knows it. They should have parked him. They didn't. I mean, you've said over time that you can't do that sort of stuff. You have to have zero tolerance. They didn't. Bailey Curry admitted he ran over Stephen Parsons. That should be a monetary fine. He's going to be a regular in the Truck Series next year for what you call for Nice, and the guy just admitted to cleaning out someone. I mean, at least go and penalize him cash and penalize him points. You should penalize Corey Haim the same. You can't manipulate. This is race manipulation. They talk about it in the Cup Series. They talk about race manipulation, and they go and penalize it. Where the hell are the penalties? Now, of course, we're doing this show on a Monday night. There could be a penalty. We'll talk about it the following week if that's the case. But usually, they don't. And when you have a race like this, and you see all these people yard sale vehicles, and this is the future, it is scary. Just scary, and it's an embarrassment to the greats of this series, the Ron Hornadays, Spriggs, Skinners, Tobodines, all these guys that have won races, a lot of races in this series. I mean, Kyle Busch ran a truck team for God knows how many years and won more races than anybody. Now, if he's ever going to run a full truck season, he's not going to do it with his own organization anymore. But it's inexplicable. I mean, what was it? A few weeks ago, I think the guy who was running, who was a director for the Truck Series, got nailed with some sort of offense that he got arrested or some shit too. So I guess it makes sense. That's the way the Truck Series ran. When you have people who are doing illegal acts running it. We're letting the inmates run the asylum, so to speak. So Ben Rhodes, under any metric, was probably the fourth best of the four drivers that made it. He ends up with the championship, and Finger left wondering what might have been because of Corey Haim being a selfish prick. Corey Haim and Carson Hocevar, those are the two best drivers in the series, but with Carson Hocevar, that's the good and the bad of Carson Hocevar in one race. And then Corey Heim showing what most young drivers do. They can have a lot of talent and a lot of speed, but they're just as liable to use their car or truck as a weapon. And that's just that isn't what you should be teaching or showing anybody in terms of racing if you're really trying to grow the sport. But I guess they have to deal with what they did and move forward. Move to the Formula One Brazilian Grand Prix. It was the last sprint race of the season. There was plenty of action in said sprint, but the result was the same in that race. We'll go with the sprint result first. Fish lips over Norris. Sergio Perez rounding out the podium. George Russell, Leclerc, Yuki Tsunoda, Lewis Hamilton, Carlos Sainz, the point scorers. Daniel Ricciardo and Oscar Piastri rounding out the top 10. Alonso and Stroll were 11th and 12th, which is interesting since what we're going to get into here in a moment. The qualifying for the Brazilian Grand Prix, the actual qualifying, saw fish lips over Leclerc, Lance Stroll, and Alonso. It was a wet qualifying on Friday. Lewis Hamilton, George Russell in the third row, Lando Norris and one of his best friends in the smooth operator, 7th and 8th. Sergio Perez, 9th. Oscar Piastri, 10th. So that was the qualifying there. The AlphaTauris were 16th and 17th in the wet qualifying session. Sprint shootout. Qualifying. Lando actually qualified on the sprint shootout pole over the two Red Bulls, the two Mercedes behind that. The two AlphaTauris come back to start 6th and 8th, and the Ferraris 7th and 9th with Leclerc and Sainz, Oscar Piastri 10th there. Haas, after the big weekend a year ago where Magnussen qualified on pole in a wet qualifying session, 11th and 12th there in the sprint shootout. The Aston Martins were 15th and 17th in the sprint. In the sprint itself, Verstappen by 4.2 seconds over Norris. Perez I mentioned those results there for the sprint itself. And then in the race, the Brazilian Grand Prix, Verstappen by 8.2 seconds over Norris. And Fernando Alonso in a photo finish beats Sergio Perez. And Lance Stroll finished 5th, which is insane. The way their weekend went, absolutely insane. That can't be. That total yard number cannot be the case. Unless that, it's probably because of all the turnovers. And they have a bunch of defensive touchdowns. Aston Martin, who had been basically non-existent for the last few weeks, or being a factor for the wrong reasons. Alonso gets back on the podium, and they get a 3rd and a 5th place. Norris, yet again, showing his prowess here in the second half of the season, trying to compete, albeit when he's not racing against his butt buddy. Carlos Sainz, Pierre Gasly, Lewis Hamilton finishes 8th, 62.8 seconds behind the leader. Yuki Tsunoda, the last car on the lead lap, in 9th, and Esteban Ocon Rounding out the top 10, Logan Sargent just outside of the points. Piastri ends up 2 laps down, Ricciardo 1 lap down. Those were the last 2 classified drivers. Leclerc crashed on the opening lap of the race and was done on the spot, really, but he got back to the pits and was able to repair the car with the red flag. You had, because of Kevin Magnussen, Alex Albon got eliminated there early. Leclerc did not start. Albon, I think, and Daniel Ricciardo. Daniel Ricciardo was able to get back out because of the red flag. Albon, I think, was had issues, and he tried to fix it on pit road, and they ended up retiring the car. Magnussen had the huge shunt that caused the red flag. Then, there were all 0 laps there. So Zhou Guan Yu, Valtteri Bottas, George Russell overheating issues cost all those drivers in the race. Fish Lips wins, continues to set records in terms of number of wins. Norris continues to show his recent form hasn't been for naught. And then Fernando Alonso, after what had been a nondescript weekend, gets a podium finish. Sergio Perez probably had one of the best weekends he's had in months. And if he wasn't in a likely to finish second in points, I think he put himself directly in line for that after his performance this weekend, Josh.
Yeah, just a good performance, for Sergio Perez after, last couple of races where he hasn't been able to put up as good of a performance, but, in Mexico's home track, crashed out of that, but recovers in Brazil. Almost gets Fernando Alonso there. Fernando had to put up crazy defense the last couple of laps. And afterwards, Fernando said it was easier to defend in 2005 than it is today. And, he was able to defend him there, but Perez passed him on the penultimate lap. But then Fernando was able to get him back on the last lap. So, close racing there between those two. I think that was pretty much the highlight of the race there for Fernando and for Sergio Perez there. So, just good racing there. The rare bit of good racing that we've seen. There's interesting, seeing that take place. I tuned in kind of late to this one. When I tuned in, I think Verstappen had made his pit stop and Lando was in the lead, and I was quietly wondering if Lando was on like some different strategy to overtake Verstappen and win, but no, it's just they were both on the same pit strategy there. So, same number of pit stops and everything, and Lando ends up in second. For Alonso takes third, and his teammate Lance Stroll takes fifth place. Actually a decent run there for the Aston Martin after last couple of weeks. They have had last couple of races they've had really poor runs. Carlos Sainz, fifth place finish. Pierre Gasly gets a points finish, without first time in a while that he's gotten a good finish. Yuki Tsunoda's actually gotten a good finish for once here and scoring a point in ninth place. Daniel Ricciardo last week finishing fourth, this week finishing 13th. So kind of a yo-yo with his race results. and everything, his consistency. Charles Leclerc once again has a issue before the race and doesn't even start. So, just unfortunate for Charles Leclerc. As he continues to go throughout his career in Ferrari, he always has these races where poor luck happens either before or during the race. So, which is typical Ferrari. Logan Sargent, of course, almost gets a point, finishing in 11th behind Esteban Ocon. So, and of course, Verstappen wins again for the 17th time this year. So, and only 2 more races. So, he might go for 19 wins, which of course would be a all-time record again. So every week he continues to set the record for most wins in Formula One. So at least we'll get a break from it this week with no racing. So, that was pretty much all that was happened in this Grand Prix in Brazil. But I mean, we'll see here in a couple weeks at Las Vegas if we see anything different with it, being a completely new track or something. So, but at the end of the day, it continues to be the Max Verstappen show here in Formula One.
Yeah, and that's something that, for all these hypocrites that wanted to complain during the Lewis Hamilton time and, all the rules and all the bullshit that's gone on with him, with Verstappen that they've broken and done, the fact that this has become basically unwatchable. I can remember even with Schumacher, it was even more watchable when Schumacher was doing it, and that was bad. So, whatever. I'm so over watching Formula One at this point. It makes me not want to watch Formula One, and I'll always say the only reason I do is because of podcasts that I do, which is this and being on Grid Talk. So we'll talk about Vegas next week on the GSP in more detail. Excuse me. The points, Perez is 32 points out of Lewis Hamilton for second in the World Drivers' Championship. The battle for fourth is very tight. Alonso, Norris, and Sainz are separated by a total of 6 points. Alonso right now in fourth, Norris fifth, so Carlos Sainz in sixth. Charles Leclerc, 28 points out of fourth, and 28, 25, and 22. George Russell in eighth. Piastri, so Leclerc, Russell, and Piastri are all basically set in their spots. Nothing's going to change there. Lance Stroll is 1 point ahead of Pierre Gasly for 10th in the Drivers' Championship. In the constructors' standings, Mercedes is 20 points ahead of Ferrari. McLaren is 21 points ahead of Aston Martin for fourth in the constructors. Williams continues to stay in seventh, 7 points ahead of AlphaTauri. Alfa Romeo 4 points ahead of Haas for ninth. And so we'll move into the GSP roundup here. Or no, actually we'll do NFL. So NFL Week 9, we'll get into that. Both of our teams are on bye. Niners going into the bye on a downward 3-game losing streak. Oh, here we go. Yeah, that's got to be him and his... He forgot to put the makeup on his ears. And, just go through... Yeah, The smile says it all, I think, there. But we just came off of the Chargers destroying the Jets. And in terms of, and then you can show this in the court. Oh boy. Yeah, so the scores from this weekend, in terms of, oh, look at that whore. And probably Crying Wolf. Then you got in the two puppet heads. Yeah, so you had 3 contending teams: the Jaguars, Niners, and Lions, all on byes. I guess the game of the week was the Cowgirls and Eagles. The Eagles scratch out a 5-point victory to get to 8-1. The Bengals continue after starting 1-3, now are 5-3, beating the Bills on Sunday Night Football. Raiders dominate against the Giants, and Daniel Jones is done for the year with an ACL. We talked about the Chargers to get to 4-4. Carolina Panthers are a disaster area. They traded away the number 1 overall. They traded away their pick, first round draft pick, to get the number 1 overall draft pick, and now they're likely going to give that pick to the Chicago Bears, and they might end up having the top 2 picks in the draft, or 2 of the top 5 draft picks in the draft. Look at the freaking smiling pieces of trash. Indianapolis gets to 4-5, so it isn't a, for the Jaguars, they're what is it, 2.5 games ahead. 2.5 games ahead of them. The Texans are 2 games behind after a 39-37 victory over the Bucks. The Commanders beat the New England Patriots. Packers and Rams in a contest of 2 teams that is going nowhere. The Browns shut out the Arizona Cardinals 27-0. The Ravens basically shut out the Seahawks 37-3 and get to 7-2. Vikings win with Josh Dobbs after the guy they had at quarterback got a concussion. The Chiefs win 21-14, but it really wasn't that close. And the Steelers beat the Titans. So the standings in the standings heading into week 10, with the playoff picture in there right now, the Chiefs and the Ravens are both at 7-2. The Jaguars on bye maintained a 3rd seed, and the Dolphins are in 4th place of the 4 division leaders. 2 teams that would, the other 3, the wild card teams as it stands right now, would be the other 3 teams in the the AFC North, which is something. Just outside the playoffs right now are the Bills, the Texans, the Chargers, and the Jets. All are 500 or above. And the Colts, Raiders are just off of that with 4-5 records. In terms of the NFC, the Eagles have a 2-game lead over the Lions. The 49ers retake the division lead after on a bye after Seattle's horrendous performance, and the New Orleans Saints are the NFC South division leaders at 5-4. Seahawks fall to the 5 seed, tied with the Cowgirls and the Vikings without a quarterback, essentially, are in 7th. And they are a game ahead of the Commanders and the Falcons. The Buccaneers fall to 3 and 5, and they're tied with the Packers. The Rams are 3 and 6. So we'll basically say that, there's 9 teams in contention in the NFC as of now. The two worst teams in the league are, and 3 of the top 4, or 4 of the top 5 are in, and based on record are in, well, no, actually you can say 5 of the top 6 are in the NFC. So yeah, it's not good in general, but I mean, I guess we'll get into the preview there for that, Josh. I mean, the Jaguars and the 49ers are going to be playing each other this week, coming off a bye. So interesting to look at what will come from that, and really what to see. I mean, although that's news, Kyler Murray is going to start this week, coming off of his ACL, and so he'll start his first game of the year against the Falcons for the Arizona Cardinals. Craig Counsell gets hired to be the Cubs manager, so that's huge news for the Cubs franchise, and taking somebody from there. I won in that league, but I'm 7th. I'm 3 and 5. I got 3.68 points out of Geno Smith. So, what are your thoughts on that matchup, Josh, for Jacksonville and San Francisco 49ers coming up this week?
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be an interesting matchup for sure. And, definitely, I mean, it should be a primetime matchup, honestly, with, who they're playing. They're playing the Jets and the Raiders on Sunday Night Football, which I don't get that one at all, but that's what it's going to be. But maybe it's an advantage for Jacksonville being a 1 p.m. game here in Jacksonville, and the 49ers is going to be playing at 10 in the morning their time. So we'll see how that goes. But it's going to be interesting. The Jaguars offense. Zay Jones may not be back in the lineup for a bit with the knee injury. He has been on the field since week 5 in London, so almost out over a month now. So that's going to be interesting to see how they can adapt to that. They still have Calvin Ridley on the outside and Christian Kirk, but they need a third wide receiver. They have Evan Ingram and Brenton Strange on tight ends, so we'll see how that matchup goes. And of course, Etienne and Tank Bigsby, Dearness Johnson running backs. So we'll see how that goes with that matchup. Defensively, I mean, I think it's going to be interesting lining up against having to stop Christian McCaffrey and stopping George Kittle. I think that's where it's going to more of the matchup is going to be, and putting Brock Purdy in a position that he hasn't been in before, or has been in the last couple of weeks that he's played. He hasn't played that well. Purdy's had the most turnover-worthy plays in the NFL against probably the most opportunistic team when it comes to turnovers in the NFL with the Jaguars. So that might be a matchup more in the Jaguars' favor. So it's going to be probably a close game. We'll see. But, I think the Jaguars probably can pull it out at the end of the day. We'll see if that happens. And, of course, offensive line for Jacksonville has been kind of shaky this year, but maybe solidified. Walker Little might be coming back from injury. Ezra Cleveland acquired in a trade last week with Minnesota, so could be extra depth or potential starter here in the next couple of weeks. We'll see, but it's interesting to see how this all play out. But it's definitely going to be a top tier matchup in the 1:00 p.m. games here on Sunday. So definitely looking forward to watching that. So we'll see how that goes. I get my guys back fantasy wise. Hopefully Debo comes back as well. So Debo Samuel, another guy that I've had on fantasy for a bit, but he's on my roster. Brock Purdy's on my roster. Trevor Lawrence and ETN also on the roster, so getting them all back. Of course, I had a poor game this week fantasy-wise because I basically had no starters on my team, so I guess I give that one to Vic there. So, just a interesting matchup as well, and hopefully now we get to see what the Jaguars look like for real. Now, this is the really tough part of the schedule. Now they've got 6 playoff teams that they're facing here in the next couple of weeks. The second half of their schedule is definitely going to show, if they're really, for real, they 6-2, people talking about how they look, and, they look so okay in some games, but, they at the top of the division now and third in the NFL right now. So, now they can, prove, that they're for real by, being one of the top teams in the NFL, in the 49ers. So, we'll see how it goes. Of course, this week was bye week and everything. Nothing happened for Jaguars wise, although I saw some chirping on Twitter about how CJ Stroud went and had a game with 5 touchdowns and over 450 yards passing, and people were wanting Trevor to look like that. And I'm like, why do we care about another quarterback, on another team, a division rival and everything? But who cares? He had a really good game, and they're not close to where we're at as a team, so I'd rather have the team record than a bunch of gaudy volume stats and having a losing record or have a mid-level record. So rather have a winning record in that regard. So we'll see how it goes this week, but looking forward to seeing how that matchup turns out on Sunday.
Yeah, on the Niners side, it's going to be, can Brock Purdy, control the ball? You brought it up, Josh, that if he is able to manage, the ball and make good decisions, you're going to have Trent Williams back. Christian McCaffrey gets a week of rest. We'll see if Kyle Shanahan decides to rest him a little bit and give a little bit more balance instead of it being 95-5 percentage with running backs. Maybe he'll make it 80-20. Debo will be back, which will be huge. Ken having those 2 key cogs of the offense out there make it so that they can have balance again and make the Jacksonville Jaguars have to work, not just their interior, the front, but also the whole defense, stretching that defense out a bit. Will they use George Kittle in the pass game, instead of using him as a blocker? That's another big factor because it's hard to defend all those guys when you look at it. So it's something to see in general. You talk about the offense there. The defense, Steve Wilkes had a bad 3 weeks. They haven't tackled anybody. They're just bad discipline or lack thereof. So can they come back this week and actually defend against one of the more dynamic quarterbacks in the league? They didn't do it against Joe Burrow. If they do what they've been doing in recent weeks, Trevor Lawrence is going to be throwing for 350 and 3 touchdowns on them. And as a fantasy owner of Trevor Lawrence, one of my leagues, that would be good. But as a 49ers fan, it would be nauseating. So it's something that they need to tackle better. They need to cover better. Nicholas John Bosa has to get to the quarterback. It's the first game for him and his buddy Chase Young together, and they'll be on either side, which will be interesting to look at. People talk about Bosa, and teams have been able to go and commit a double team to Nick Bosa. Well, are you going to commit a double team to Nick Bosa when you have a guy who also has been a Rookie of the Year in the NFL on defense, who's also an Ohio State pass rusher? And you add the rotation that they have on that defensive line as well with all those pass rushers and players. Will Javon Hargrave come back to his early season form and be that run stuffer? And the linebacker core that we have, can they tackle? I mentioned it. Can they tackle better and can they cover better? You do that, it should be a very close contest. These are two of the better teams in the NFL. Both of them are division leaders right now. Key contest. There's a little bit more wiggle room for Jacksonville within their division. Not as much if they want to stay in the mix for the number one seed. The Niners right now are not playing for a 1 seed. They're most likely looking at a 2 unless something strange happens for the Eagles. They don't want to lose here. Seattle is scuffling. The rest of the division is a cesspool. Most of the NFC is a cesspool. So we'll see what happens with that. Fantasy-wise, losing my league, but it really doesn't matter because everyone around me ended up like Josh, and unfortunately all of us took L's this week. The teams that have been winning continue to win. I win in my dynasty league where it doesn't matter, and I win in one league that I'm in that I'm not really a factor in right now, but I have a chance to possibly make the playoffs out of there. I win in the one league where I'm leading, so I get to 8-1 there. And I'm in 2 leagues where I have I'm in 2 leagues where I'm right now. I'm 5th in one and I'm 7th in the other. So on the cusp of the playoffs. In the fall brawl league, there's 4 teams at 4 and 5. Both myself and Josh are 2 of those teams. Got 2 teams at 3 and 6. So you look at from 4th to 9th, separated by a game. The top 3 teams pulling away right now, couple games or more ahead. Luke, Vic, and Steve. So right now it looks like with the 5 games to go in the regular season that they're pretty solid in their positioning. I dropped Daniel Jones, of course, with his knee. He's not going to be around. He's active for week 9 against the Bengals. He wasn't. We'll see if he's active next week for Monday Night Football. Should be, and that's what I did. Khalil Herbert, hopefully he'll be playing. It's been a rough stretch here. I have to start looking at my IDPs have been killing me all season. Lackluster performance overall. I mean, Lamar Jackson only threw for 187 yards. He had no touchdowns. Fumbled once. So when you have your number one quarterback play like that, it's bad. Neither of my quarterbacks did anything. My high scorer was Rashad White there. So you're not able to win when you're doing that sort of shit. My 7-1 team, I've been missing Justin Jefferson for weeks, and we've still been all right, luckily, or knock on wood. Josh Allen had an all right performance, got productivity from Jonathan Taylor, Raheem Mostert, and Jake Ferguson to go and carry me because my wide receivers didn't do jack shit. So that is that. GSP Roundup, the World Endurance Championship finished their 2023 season, and which saw Toyota get the hypercar driver's title. The Sebastian Buemi, Brendan Hartley, Rhea Hirakawa win the race start to finish. The rookie test takes place And then they have, get into that news, the result season, the 8 hours of Bahrain, the results of the race. The number 8 Toyota wins by 47.5 seconds over their teammate. Number 7, the Ferrari number 50, Miguel Molino, Antonio Fuoco, and Nicholas Nielsen finished third. The Hertz Team Jota Sport Porsche, the last car in the lead lap, in fourth. The Porsche number 6 for Penske, a lap down, in fifth. The AF Corsa second. Ferrari, the one that won the 24 Hours of Le Mans, finished sixth. The second factory Porsche with Dane Cameron, seventh. The two Peugeots, eighth and ninth, and the Proton Porsche 99 finished 10th. The Cadillac was 3 laps down in 11th. The winners of the LMP2 category, Rui Andrade, Robert Kubica, and Louis Delatraz for Team WRT, beats their teammate by 9.19 seconds. That's Sean Galale, Habsburg, Lotrigan, Habsburg, and Robin Freins. And then Jota, number 28, with David Heinemeier Hansen, Pietro Fittipaldi, and Oliver Rasmussen. They're in GTM. Saw the Iron Dames team. They qualified on pole, and they ended up winning the race. So the 3 ladies, Rahel Fry, Sarah Bovey, and Michelle Gadding, get the victory by 5.54 seconds over the D Station Racing, Aston Martin, Talbot, Stevenson, and Fuji. And Northwest AMR, the Harder Racing, Aston of Alex Riberas, McAnally, and Ian James. The season classification, let's see here, the World Endurance Drivers Championship, as I mentioned, the number 8 Toyota are the world champions. Hartley, Hirakawa, Buemi over their teammates, and the top 3 in the race were the top 3 in the championship. And then you had the Ferrari that won the 24 Hours of Le Mans, Perguidi, Giovinazzi, and Collado fourth. The Cadillac team, Ganassi, was fifth. The first of the Penske Porsches was in sixth. Both, or they finished sixth and seventh. Then the Peugeots were eighth. And then ninth was the Jota Sport Porsche drivers, and the second Peugeot was 10th. In terms of the manufacturers, Toyota wins over Ferrari, and then Porsche, Cadillac, Peugeot. In the World Cup for Hypercar, Hertz Team Jota, the winner there. In the LMP2 Drivers' Championship, Delatraz, Kubica, and Andrade, the world champions there. Or the endurance, yeah. Then over Costa, Scherer, and Schmikowski, who won LMP2 in the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Then you had Lubin, Hansen, and Habsburg third. Lubin and Hansen third. Habsburg, Freins, Golale fourth. Pearson, Jarvis, and Heimer were fifth. In LMP2 teams, the Team WRT 41 gets the championship over the Inter Europol. United Autosports was third. Then the second WRT and the second United Autosports fourth and fifth. And then Jota number 28 was 6th. And in GTM was long ago was the Chevy Corvette, Keating, Capsburg, Verone. They finish first. They win over the Iron Dames, Gadding, Fry, and Bovey. And then David Rigon, Castellacci, and Floor. The team's title was Corvette Racing over the Iron Dames, AF Corsa, Ferrari, Dempsey, Proton, Porsche, and then the ORT by TF Aston finished 5th there. The rookie test saw the likes of one Valentino Rossi. I was about to say Alexander Rossi, but the great Valentino Rossi debuting racing in a LMP2, testing LMP2. You had Will Stevens driving a 963 Porsche. I'm going to go and bring up, so gotta go there, Norman Natta, blah, blah. That's the news. They don't show the listing. Team doing so try to find some standings or results or whatever, but interesting to see what will come of the WEC with who will be chosen to race next year in the championship, with all the new cars coming in, both in GT, in the new GT3, LMGT3 category, and then also with the hypercar category. MotoGP, Moto2 in Malaysia, they will the standings heading into Malaysia, Pecco Bagnaia, the leader by 23 over Jorge Martin, Marco Bezzecchi third, Binder, Alex Espargaro 4 points out of Johan Zarco there. And then in Moto2, it's Pedro Acosta. No, go there. Yeah. Pedro Acosta in then trying to go and get that championship before he moves on to the MotoGP category to race for Gas, the Tech 3 team. And then I don't know what that was, but you go Acosta over Arbolino, Jake Dixon, Aaron Kinnett, Somikat Chantra in the top 5, and then you have, oh Jesus, that's not good. Aldeguer, Alonso Lopez, Gonzalez, Salek, and Agura, with Joe Robertson 14th. And in terms of the calendar right now, you have there's 3 races to go. So this is the final run out. They'll race 3 consecutive weekends. Sepang, Malaysia, then Qatar and Valencia to end their 2023 season. The NHRA, their final race of the 2023 season, championships to be won. 2 championships are to be decided there, with memorable series. So Top Fuel and Funny Car will have their championships in terms of, and there's a Pro Stock 6 world title, 4th in 5 years, back-to-back races, 14, set up a clinching title during qualifying. Yeah, so Gage Herrera will clinch his first world champion. Yeah, so So yeah, Gage Herrera is going to be the pro stock motorcycle champion. Anders, stupid ass, will be more likely be the champion in pro stock for the fourth time in 5 years, and six-time champion, which is most of any woman in the history of NHRA. So that's a big deal in terms of women in motorsports. In terms of top fuel, Steve Torrence leads by 15 points over Doug Coletta, 34 over Leah Pruitt, 76 Mike Salinas and Justin Ashley, 82 with points and a half or whatever going on at Pomona. So anything can happen there. In funny car, 3 drivers, Matt Hagan leads by 15 over Tasca and 17 over Robert Height. So that's interesting to see what will happen with those categories, with those 2 categories, the nitro categories. And Anderson is locked in a second, more than likely. Hartford and Glenn probably battling for third in pro stock. Then you have Stanfield and Troy Coughlin Jr., 1 point separating those 2 guys for fifth. Pro stock motorcycle behind Herrera, Krawick more than likely. It will be in second. Matt Smith, Hector Rana battling for third in points. Evaristo trying to finish in top 5. Chase Van Zandt is not going to be racing this weekend due to injuries he suffered. So that'll be, he'll fall back. Ingwerson, Angie Smith coming back from injury she suffered in a crash a few races ago in Indianapolis or wherever. So she'll be battling there. Steve Johnson, Kelly Klontz. All right, so Josh, let us know what's going on in the world of iRacing and in gaming, and anything that we should be looking at for this coming week.
Yeah, so, I mean, normally we'd have made our picks, and, well, we picked nobody to win, so, yeah, I mean, now we go straight into the picks section, but, I mean, iRacing, now it's the off-season for NASCAR, so there isn't really any content for Cup, I think, but, I mean, there's still plenty of racing otherwise. I think the 87 cars are at California Speedway, so at Auto Club, so that should be a good one. The trucks, I guess like every series, but the Cup Series has something. But trucks at iRacing Super Speedway, have ARCA at USA Speedway, IndyCar at Watkins Glen, that might be interesting. Gen 4 at Old Texas Motor Speedway this week. Xfinity at, I think, yeah, Chicagoland for some reason on the roadside. Formula Fords at Laguna Seca. Toyota GR Cup at Watkins Glen, so that actually might be good. Mustang Skip Barber at Laguna Seca as well. Class A iRacing IMSA Series at Road America. Global Mazda Cup at Summit Point Raceway. Formula IR at Pocono Oval, I guess, even though it's a road car at Oval. And then on the other side of it, we have the Formula IR Oval Series, which is doesn't count towards anything. That's at Auto Club also. So 2 cars that both go 240 miles an hour racing on ovals this week, and then the Touring Car Challenge at Summit Point Raceway. So yeah, that's there's always a lot to pick from iRacing. I'm just choosing the ones that I have content in and available eligibility. I think other series, the IMSA. So yeah, the IMSA iRacing series also at Road America. Well, I already said that, but that was the fixed one. The open one is also at Road America the Open Wheel C series for iRacing, the Indy Pro 2000s. That's also at Road America as well, so might hit that one up. The Formula Ford's fixed series was at Laguna, but the Open series is at Okayama. So lots of good content there on the road side. Oval side, just to go back to that. Oh yeah, also the Draft Master series is at Talladega again, but with the Xfinity car, so that might be free points there. Like I said, the iRacing Class B fixed series at Chicago, and like I said, and then still waiting on the Winter Tour to open up for the 87 on both the fixed and the open setup side. Dirt race, just to look at that. If you want dirt racing, street stocks at Lima Land Motorsports Park and Legends Cup at USA Speedway on the dirt. So, and if you want to go for dirt road racing, that basically just off-road series. The fixed Volkswagen Beetle series is at the Phoenix Raceway Dirt Rallycross track. Rallycross series, which that's the Ford Fiesta, VW Beetle, Subaru WRX. That's that's at Iowa Speedway on the Rallycross side. I didn't know they had a Rallycross track. And then Daytona Rallycross, the Lucas Oil off-road car at the Daytona Rallycross dirt road track. So yeah, don't really touch the series, but figure we'd talk about them since that's kind of winding down on iRacing too. Well, kind of, but not really. And then team races, I think this is still the I guess they're grouping it now, but endurance Class C endurance series, which I have cars in Honda Type R and the BMW GT4. That's, I guess, potentially at VIR. 720 minutes for team series. That's a long time. And then the IMSA endurance series is at also, it's a lot of IMSA series at Road America, but 160 minutes at Road America. So that's pretty much all the racing that I have available in iRacing this week. Of course, was looking on Reddit for some sim racing news. According to IndyCar, Motorsport Games, publishing potentially an IndyCar game. That status is up in the air. Not surprising. They had made a ton of layoffs recently. I think like 30 to 60% layoffs there. So yeah, I highly doubt that that'll ever get released. Anybody that had hope has probably given up by now, and probably a smart move would be to just license out the car for IndyCar back to iRacing and back to any other game that wants to feature IndyCar in their racing games. So that's the only real news that I can pick up from that on that side. Oh, actually, I don't know if it's real news, but I guess the potentially soon at some point they're going to have rain. We've talked about it before. They'll have rain racing on iRacing, but I'd seen a video where I guess they were testing. I don't know if that was the video, but like they had sounds of rain racing on iRacing. So that should be interesting if we get that hopefully soon rather than later. Potentially rain racing, that'd be pretty fun to experience on iRacing. I did play Kart Racing Pro a little bit last week and ran in the rain on a kart at GoPro Motorplex, or Trackhouse Motorplex as it's called now, since Trackhouse changed the name from GoPro to Trackhouse. Which that was pretty interesting, trying to run around in the rain. Very hard to control. You can't really go that fast in complete wet. You have to be able to establish a dry line. So I'm sure iRacing is still trying to figure that out. I mean, I know a lot of games already have rain in it, but iRacing tries to be very accurate in what they do. So we'll see if they're able to do it by the end of the year. If that's a surprise they've got waiting for us at the end of the year, or if that's potentially an update that happens next like spring or something like that. We'll see. But yeah, I mean, that's all I got for sim racing this week. Of course, Twitch TVs for the streams at usailor2 on there. Go on there and watch our streams, and of course, Twitter at JB Huffine. Go watch or go see all my tweets. Been talking about the past couple of races here on the last couple of races here on the schedule. Of course, I'll be talking about the Jags, of course, and anything else that I'm interested in this week. So go on there and follow me there, and then of course our YouTube channel at Gripster Podcast. Go on there and see our videos that have been uploaded and watch our video streams on there. So can't believe it's already the end of the NASCAR season. Seems like it was not too long ago that we started the 75th season of NASCAR. Now we're at the end, and now we go on into the 76th one next year. So can't wait for Daytona in February, and it's still not too long away, but it's still a long ways to go until then. So looking forward to that, and of course the rest of the year with racing that's left on the calendar. Looking forward to seeing Max Verstappen more than likely win the last two races here in the Formula One season at the end of the month. So looking forward to that. So of course glad to do it, and we'll see each other again next week.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting close to the holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas, and we're getting towards the season reviews here, probably with the gaps in the races, with nothing to preview next week or getting into next week, except for roundup racing. I think we could probably utilize that as a place to go and review the 2023 IndyCar Series season, but we'll look at that as we go on. Thanks as always, man, for taking care of the back end, and also with the YouTube side of things. For myself, you can find me at PGMatthew28. You can on X, you can find us at GripsterPod on X, PhilipGMatthew.com blog site. We're on Podbean, and basically anywhere you can find podcasts, you can find the Gripster podcast. If it goes fast, we talk about it here, or at least try to. We will be back next week for episode 195. Get into MotoGP, NHRA. We'll preview the Las Vegas Grand Prix, talk about Week 10 in the NFL, the Jaguars and 49ers, and also get into fantasy football as well as we get closer to the cutoff for the regular season in fantasy there. So for Josh, I'm Phil. Thanks for listening to Gripster Podcast and subscribing. Let your friends know. We talk about all things racing here, and we'll be back next week for the Gripster Podcast.